The United States of America has passed a bill that could sanction foreign actors supporting rival factions in Libya. The House of Representatives on Tuesday voted 386 to 35 in favour of the Libya Stabilisation Act introduced by Democrat Ted Deutch and Republican Joe Wilson. Now, the move came 1 week after Libya's eastern-based parliament passed a no-confidence vote in the country's unity government based in Tripoli under the administration of interim Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Deba, in a new blow to the United Nations-backed peace efforts and jeopardizing upcoming elections. The escalation comes amid growing tensions between the Tripoli-based administration and the eastern-based parliament in Tobruk, 3 months in advance of the planned national elections. Now, Libya tumbled into chaos following a US and NATO-backed 2011 revolt that toppled and killed Gaddafi, with rival militia and foreign powers fighting for control. A war between West Libya forces and Haftar came to a formal halt with a UN-backed ceasefire in October last year. The world body has since been overseeing a complex peace process with elections that are set for December the 24th. Now, counter-terrorism expert David Otto joins us now to unravel who these targeted groups are and if this bill serves the intended purpose or the opposite. He's in Accra in Ghana. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you again once more for having me.
So these sanctions, might they be useful even before we discuss who is intended?
I mean, this is a diplomatic solution, which the House of Representatives is looking to initiate. You know, of course, the Libya Stabilisation Act that's just been signed in 12/28 is a follow-up to the previous Libya Stabilisation Act, which was initiated in 2020. That's just in the back of the ceasefire agreement, which gave birth to the government of national unity. So the aim of this act is perhaps to squeeze the hands and the visible and invisible hands of various actors within Libya, both as we know it, the government of national accord, which is based in Tripoli, but also the Libyan National Army of a self-proclaimed General Khalifa Haftar, and individuals, groups, organizations that have been flagged by the US as being responsible for actually aiding and supporting one side or the other. Now, we don't know if this is going to be, just a slap on the wrist kind of implementation, but the stakes are very high, and I don't think if this is going to be the solution that Libyans are looking for. The US has lost a lot of credibility, and it is seen to be affiliated more to the government of national accord, which, therefore is not seen as a neutral party by all means.
Are there foreign actors, as we speak, that are choosing sides in the Libya conflict?
Yes, of course there are. If we're talking about, for example, the Libyan National Army, which is controlled by General Khalifa Haftar in Benghazi, which is the east of Libya, then you're looking at countries like the United Arab Emirates. Russia is one of those countries that is also supporting, the Libyan National Army, and they're saying that they've got mercenaries on ground. Of course, because there is no recognized government in Libya to be able to issue some kind of a bilateral agreement. So, this is seen as a clandestine kind of support. Now, from the side of the government of national accord, which is the UN-recognized government, you've got Turkey, which is one of the main countries that are backing that government in Tripoli. Now, these are just the official, individuals or official parties, that have been targeted by these sanctions. But you also have ethnic militias. Libya is a very, ethnic and tribal society. So you've got, groups that are linked to various tribes and ethnic groups. You've got tribal warlords, that have been targeted. You have criminal networks that operate arms trafficking, smuggling inside and outside Libya. Not to forget about the terrorist organizations that are linked both to the so-called Islamic State, but also Al-Qaeda and various drug smugglers. So there are multiple parties which the US is aiming to target. But they are looking more of the likes of Russia, the likes of United Arab Emirates, and perhaps countries like Turkey, which are easily identifiable.
But when you mention those countries, they're not small players. Are we suggesting that a few token individuals are likely to be targeted, but the greater impact that these countries have will not change?
I think what we always see, is that, there are two kinds of players. There's the big fish and the small fishes. Countries like Russia, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, these are very powerful states. And as you rightly said, it's unlikely that, the US will target them. What we would see, as we've seen in recent reports, is the US targeting individuals and very small corporations, organizations that are affiliated to the transportation of, smuggling of arms, as they call it, and smuggling of oil, sales of, minerals, and, transfer of funds from one set of organization to another. So it will hurt the small guys, who have a very little insignificant role to play. I mean, I bet, that cannot be counted out as well. But the bigger players, the likes of Russia, the likes of Turkey, the likes of the United Arab Emirates, they are the untouchables, when it comes to the situation of Libya. So there again, I think this is just a watershed. I mean, the US can only do as much because itself and its reputation is highly damaged in terms of its stabilization plans for Libya, as we've seen in other countries that recently.
So diplomacy, the name of the game in the interim, but we have elections that are under serious threat after this vote of no confidence from the West. Where does that leave Libya? Are these elections likely, or are we going to see another cycle of delay and conflict?
I've been following Libya for as long as the conflict has been there, since 2011. That's a decade now. There has always been promises of elections, as if elections were the final solution to the problems in Libya. I think they are not. And even if we were to see elections come December 24th, as it's been planned, of this year, that is not going to solve the problem. But are we going to see elections taking place? I don't think so. There's a lot of key players within Libya. There are people who have very, good popularity at the regional level or at the state level, but then they lack the local support. Then there are individuals who have very strong tribal support, but don't have the recognition from the state level or international. So I think what the US, will likely succeed in doing, alongside the sanctions that it promised, is perhaps to, bring in more humanitarian aid, into Libya for the suffering individuals. But I don't think this, a diplomatic solution, which is being seen as a soft solution, is going to have any lasting impact. It will not likely lead to an election, free and fair election, as the US, is saying, because there are so many aggrieved individuals in Libya. Libya is so, divided in such a way that it is only Libyans who can resolve the problem. And that is why I've argued in so many times than one there should be some kind of a focus on looking at, the last known good. Lately the son of Muammar Gaddafi came and talked about his prospects for bringing together the various tribes that, his father had put together. And I think Libyans will cherish, some kind of a return to where it last, got really bad. But again, there are so many people that have benefited from the chaos that any talk of stability, from the Libyan family, from the Gaddafi family, is quickly discredited as, a return to some kind of tyranny. I fear for Africa because, Libya sits in a very strategic position. But we must go back to the situation where culture has to eat strategy for breakfast.
You mentioned there are a number of key players in this equation. We've seen the Eastern strongman Khalifa Haftar step back from his military roles, and I suppose he's made his intention very clear. The question then becomes, someone doing this and operating with the kind of strength that he has, it almost seems as if he's not president, there will not be peace in that country.
I think that's the position that Khalifa Haftar has placed himself, and the reason why he's done that is because he has very powerful support. You're only as powerful as your network, and General Khalifa Haftar is somebody who has built a lot of support from countries like, again, as I mentioned, Russia, the United Arab Emirates. Because I think what is going on here is, again, another form of proxy war, whereby those in support, against any Western influence in Libya, are aligning with General Khalifa Haftar. They don't want anything to do with, a successful regime change, because they understand, just like we've seen in the case of Afghanistan, that you can change a regime, for the next 30 years and bring in democracy. But, as long as the people do not want democracy, the people that matter, the Libyans, then it is not going to be successful. Khalifa Haftar is somebody who brings on board some kind of a Libyan solution to the problem. But I think the issue with him is that he's got very powerful local support, or some local support, but he doesn't have the international backing. And I think he also fails to get the support of the very powerful tribes that have a significant say in the politics of Libya. And that is why I think some kind of an alliance between people that have support from the tribes and people that have support for a Libyan solution to the problem are likely to succeed. The government of national accord, I'm afraid to say, is seen as a government that is backed by the West, the same West that is accused, rightly so, of overthrowing the regime of Muammar Gaddafi. So I don't see a sustainable solution coming from the government of national accord, even the newly termed government of national unity. I don't think it's going to work. So we've got to look at the local solution again very deeply in order for us not to make the same mistakes that the US made in Afghanistan.
All right, let's go back to where we started, and it's these sanctions that are being passed in the United States. And I know that Zimbabweans watching will be saying, here we go again, the United States waking up one day and putting sanctions on a country. And the question must be then, how is it that America can make decisions like this?
Because they have the power to do so. That's the simple answer to that question. America makes decisions because, they can back up those decisions with firepower. If you're a big dog around and, you're the man with the biggest gun, then, everybody has to listen to you, or else, they would have to be able to defend themselves against your might. So I think, again, we must be very specific here that the sanction of the Libya Stabilisation Act is not against Libya. It is against individuals and organizations. Again, that could indirectly have a significant impact on the livelihood of Libyans. But this is not a countrywide sanction. It is a sanction that is being targeted at certain countries. They call them mercenaries or groups of individuals that are seen to stand in the way of stability and peace in Libya. One thing which the sanction does mention is that it will continue to bring in humanitarian aid. It would continue to make sure that it can realize an effective election in December 2021. But again, you're right. This is America, the United States coming again and talking about imposing sanctions on a country or individuals within a country without going through the UN, which is supposed to be the arbiter of national states. Maybe the argument is that Libya is not a recognized state because it is divided into various factions. But I see one thing very clear. It is the weakness of the African Union that allows countries like the United States to continue to push its way forward into the internal affairs of an African state.
David, Otto, we'll leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us.